Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate your time and your interest in joining us today. We're going to go ahead and let everybody hop into the webinar, but we're so glad that you are here with us today for this webinar on fostering equity-grounded emotional relationships that reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in P through third grade settings. We're so glad you're spending your afternoon with us. We're going to wait for a moment while everyone gets logged into Zoom for our webinar. Thank you for our patience as we started a minute late. As we wait, I want to share some fantastic news. For the first time, the California Department of Education, CDE, is offering professional development certificates to all attendees of this live webinar. You've been asking for it, and we've made it happen. Your professional development certificate will be sent from noreply.upk@gmail.com to the email address you provided during registration. Please be aware that this is an unmonitored no reply address. Please do not attempt to contact that email. If you do not receive your professional development certificate within the next 2 weeks, so by October 3rd, please reach out to us at upk@cde.ca.gov. A link to the mailbox will be shared in the chat shortly. Please note that certificates will only be issued for those who attend the live webinar. Additionally, in case you missed the announcement regarding the recording and the PowerPoint slides for our most recent P3 webinars, I am thrilled to share that the recordings and PowerPoint presentations for the webinars Best Practices for Supporting Educators to Address Children's Behaviors that Challenge Adults, held in April 2024, and the webinar Supporting Developmentally Appropriate Toileting Practices, a Critical Strategy to Strengthen P3 Alignment, held in January 2024, have been posted to California Educators Together. We will share in chat now how to access those recordings and the accompanying PowerPoints. Next slide. We are now going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. Welcome to the California Department of Education's Fostering Equity-Grounded Emotional Relationships that Reduce the Use of Exclusionary Discipline in P through third grade settings. We are very excited to have you here with us today. I'm Shanna Burkholz-Vasquez, the administrator of the UPK Implementation and Support Office in the Early Education Division in CDE, and I am one of the presenters for today's webinar. I just have a few quick logistics to run through before we get started. First, we will be taking questions and answers in the Q&A feature. So please feel free to communicate with us there and ask questions if needed. We'll do our best to address them. Lastly, we will have the slide deck and recording available on California Educators Together in the UPK/P3 group within a few weeks for those who would like a copy of this webinar. I will now pass it to Sarah Neville Morgan. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Shanna, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. This is our 19th edition of the Opportunities for All Branch, or OFAB, pre-kindergarten through third grade, or P3 webinar series. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and today's speakers. As Shanna said, my name is Sarah Neville Morgan, and I am the Deputy Superintendent of the Public Instruction of the Opportunities for All branch at CDE. With me today from CDE are Stephen Proctor, Director of the Early Ed Division, and Shanna Burkholz-Vasquez, whom you just heard from. Next slide, please. Today's P3 webinar is the second installment of our three-part series on avoiding exclusionary discipline. In April, we kicked off this series with our first webinar, Best Practices for Supporting Educators to Address Children's Behaviors that Challenge Adults. This initial P-3 webinar delved into understanding the meaning behind children's behaviors and emphasized positive behavioral supports, research-based practices, and strategies to support educators in their classrooms, in their programs, and with their children and students. In the second part of the series, we are picking up the momentum of part 1 by returning to the topic of understanding the meaning behind children's behavior, but this time adding an additional layer of using an equity mindset that is rooted in children's culture and their experiences. We will also hear from our guest speakers on how establishing equity-grounded emotional relationships will reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in preschool through 3rd grade, and I might add, beyond. Part 3 will be on teacher and child interactions with a focus on the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, or CLAS. More details for this webinar will be sent through our P3 alignment listserv email soon. Next slide, please. When discussing equity and remaining grounded in it while creating foundational relationships with students and children, we must address the topic of bias. How can we address our own biases to establish a solid, equity-grounded foundation for building and sustaining relationships with children and families? Our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, has highlighted the need to address bias throughout his term as State Superintendent. In addition to prior initiatives that provided funding to support bias training, he also supported the publication Creating Equitable Early Learning Environments for Young Boys of Color, Disrupting Disproportionate Outcomes. A shout out to all the authors who helped make that happen. In this publication, it addresses bias and promotes equity in early childhood education. Some key ways this publication helps California address bias are strengthening our racial awareness, addressing implicit bias, creating culturally responsive environments, disrupting disproportionate discipline partners, and providing a roadmap for equity. I hope you all take time to dive into the book and read it for yourselves. I will now pass it to Steve to share how California has worked on preventing exclusionary discipline in our California State Preschool Programs, or CSPPs.
Thank you, Sarah. Many of you may know that California has enacted laws to limit the use of suspension and expulsion in early childhood settings. For instance, Assembly Bill, or AB 2806, which was passed in 2022, prohibits suspension and expulsion in preschools, as well as state-subsidized childcare programs for infants and toddlers, except in extraordinary circumstances involving both serious and validated safety concerns. In September 2023, the Early Education Division at CDE issued Management Bulletin 23-08 to implement these requirements. This Management Bulletin provides guidance to California State Preschool Program contractors on the requirements for suspension, expulsion, or disenrolling a child due to behavior. The goal of this bulletin is to ensure that all possible interventions are explored to support children with behaviors that are challenging to adults, rather than resorting to excluding a child from the education program. Next slide, please. Now, I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest speakers, Dr. Stephanie Currington and Christy Norwood. Beginning with Dr. Stephanie Currington, Dr. Currington is the founder and CEO of the Early Learning Assessing Classroom Sociocultural Equity Scale, or ACCESS, She co-authored Access and has partnered exclusively with Start Early to offer professional learning for the Access framework. Second, we have Christy Norwood, Senior Manager of Professional Learning at Start Early. As Senior Manager, she is involved in developing and designing professional learning experiences that support Access. Thank you, Dr. Currington and Christy, for joining us today. We are so excited about your presentation, and I will now pass it over to Christy. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome to everyone. As part of our presentation today, we want to touch on the main objectives of this panel discussion as an introduction and offer you some ideas to consider how we can better support children by viewing their behavior through an equity mindset. During the presentation, we will unpack and work to understand what we mean when we think about children's behaviors through an equity mindset. Discuss how children's behavior is a form of communication that is rooted in their culture and lived experience. Discuss how we can improve outcomes for children by establishing equity-grounded emotional relationships and fostering equitable relationships between peers of children in the classroom. And finally, we will discuss how to increase educators' knowledge of how to provide more equitable discipline, individualized instruction, and social and emotional opportunities that honor and validate a child's cultural lived experience to reduce exclusionary discipline practices. Next slide, please. We often hear children who are labeled as having challenging behaviors in the classroom. When we stop and consider the context for that label, we might start to see some patterns emerge. Emotions are the driver of our behaviors. And all behavior is communication about what people are thinking and feeling. Emotional stress can cause misbehavior. When we stop and consider behavior through this lens and recognize signals of emotional stress, we are closer to adapting an equity-informed lens in understanding behavior, and thus redefining what we may call challenging behaviors as stress behaviors in the classroom. What would it look like if instead of labeling a child with challenging behavior, we stop to consider the child's needs, experiences, and cultural identities, and how it is or is not reflected in the classroom, or shared among their peers, or with their teachers? How might we consider all of these factors and contextualize behaviors also within a lens of emotion, trauma, and stress? Next slide, please. So what do we mean by challenging behaviors in the classroom? By defining the behaviors and understanding their form and function, we can take a more empathetic approach in understanding that emotional stress is often the driver of a child's challenging behaviors. Here are some examples of what might typically be labeled as a challenging behavior in the classroom. Problems with peers, incomplete schoolwork, problems with teachers, meaning conflicted relationships, not being able to sit still, lack of participation, impulsive actions, and off-task behaviors. Importantly, the way that a child behaves may be interpreted and disciplined inequitably based on the child's racial or cultural background. This is a form of bias that increases the stress that a child, particularly racially marginalized children, are more likely to experience in the classroom and in care settings. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Currington to give us some more information. Dr. Currington?
Hello. Thank you, Christy. So, what do we mean by adopting an equity frame for behavior? Let's talk about that more. Next slide. First, let's remember that equity is about giving every child what they need and responding to and interacting with each child based upon the skills, abilities, interests, and emotions, you name it. Equity is about looking at each and every individual child and trying to figure out, what does this child need? What is this child trying to tell me? That is how you adopt an equity framework. And once you adopt that framework, it will be easier for you to ask yourself, is this child misbehaving, or are their behaviors a sign of stress? Next slide.
So we recognize the influence that classroom environments, teachers, and peer children have on a child's learning and development. We also recognize that there is an opportunity to transform learning spaces with an emphasis on racial equity. But we can't address what we aren't measuring. If we are committed to interrupting bias and its impact on racially marginalized learners, we need to find ways to link our measurement of classroom quality to the equitable experiences of all children in the classroom. The Assessing Classroom Sociocultural Equity Scale is a research-based measurement tool that assesses quality within interactions specifically related to equity of classroom interaction for racially marginalized learners, or RMLs, in early childhood education, ECE, classrooms. But why access? We believe that gathering data is an essential aspect of changing our current practices and beliefs, and that across the ecosystem, we can gather data that can be used for action, self-reflection, and planning and growth. By gathering data in a variety of ways and for a variety of purposes, we will be better able to understand the current practices while simultaneously shining light on the landscape within which our practices are occurring. Next slide, please. So we are talking about establishing equity-grounded relationships. Excuse me. Sorry, I need to take some water. While we may be able to understand logically that children express and communicate through various forms of behaviors, research has shown that racially and ethnically diverse children experience lower quality care and educational experiences, which can often be tied to the lack of equity-grounded emotional relationships between teachers and peers in the classroom. Even in high-quality care, children of color may not have the same learning experience and relationships with their teachers. Research shows that in the classroom settings, children of color are talked to less, are asked fewer questions, have their emotional expressions misunderstood, are bullied by peers because of their skin color and how they look, and are disciplined more harshly. If we know that their experience is different, we need to think about how to measure and understand their experience better. This is especially true when thinking about children who are enrolled in our publicly funded programs, because these programs are designed to serve children who are from families facing financial hardships and who are primarily children of color. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Currington.
So when we understand that children's behavior is a form of communication that's rooted in their culture and experiences, we can adopt the mindset that high quality classrooms must be rooted in racial equity, and educators and caregivers adequately prepared to support equitable relationships for racially marginalized learners. Racial equity is at the heart of quality. We cannot achieve quality classrooms and ECE programs without addressing racial bias and promoting equity. We need to expand our understanding of quality and invest in social cultural equity. By centering equity in terms of quality, we are not giving up anything else. In fact, we make all the other important aspects of the classroom stronger. So Access assesses quality of equitable classroom interactions by measuring for critical components that support children's psychological safety, their inclusion, and affirming their cultural experiences, such as critical thinking skills. Combining rigorous instruction with supporting critical thinking skills is key. Conversations. Encouraging all children's free expression through conversations that center on social emotional learning and perspective building. Also, peer relationships build a positive sense of self in children and support positive interactions between peers and teachers. Next slide. We also know that equitable discipline is an aspect of high quality, and using equitable and positive discipline in the classroom is important. Emotional connections, that means connections that incorporate children's heritage, their home lives, their cultural identity, and lived experience into the classroom. So we make classrooms stronger by ensuring that each and every child is getting the right dose of the things that they need to thrive and feel safe. But let's dig a little deeper about discipline. Next slide. There's a vicious cycle going on here that contributes to the real problem that we see with discipline in the classroom. Let's start at the top of the cycle with the workforce, with teachers feeling stressed, burnt out, and needing help managing children's behavior in the classroom. Teachers may not have the resources, the training, or the support from leadership needed to navigate this. And this result is shown in the green box on the right, where due to teachers feeling stressed and overwhelmed, the result is that we may expose children to harsh, unequitable discipline that while they are in the classroom. This is what we call daily discipline. The accumulation of children's lived experience of inequitable daily discipline and the environment that it promotes within the classroom then feeds the final box in the cycle, where we witness a systemic inequalities in racial and ethnic and special education disparities in rates of suspension and expulsion. These are just some of the examples of the harm caused by this cycle of unmitigated, inequitable discipline in our early childhood classrooms. And the cycle perpetuates itself and harms both children, but also the educators. Next slide. So think about how you approach discipline every day. What does your daily discipline look like? And in return, what does it feel like for the learners? Here, we've listed some ways that daily discipline shows up and how it presents in the classroom setting. One example, repeated reprimands and punishment that teachers use routinely every day. Indicators of teachers' views on what is developmentally inappropriate and behavior management strategies. Daily discipline is also evident by the discipline climate created in the classroom. And it's rooted in teachers' ideas about how to change behavior and how to promote positive behavior. Next slide. Why is daily discipline important? Because it sets the tone for the classroom environment. The way that we practice daily discipline can make children feel threatened, unwelcomed, or unsafe. It can foster a negative self-identity and poor self-esteem, and it can contribute to peer rejection and stereotypes. Next slide. Sorry about that. So research shows that children are disciplined differently based upon who they are. Black boys and Black girls are targets of harsher discipline than their peers. It can be difficult to recognize when teachers are engaging in discipline that is harsh, especially when we are working hard in the classroom setting to manage and support the needs of our learners who may be stressed. Self-reflection is a critical antidote in interpreting these harsh discipline practices and can even be a window into bias that is guiding teachers' actions and reactions. One of the many things that makes Access ideal for classroom observation is the unique perspective it can offer in terms of discipline. There's a whole dimension in Access that is dedicated to measuring discipline in the classroom specifically. On this slide, we offer some key questions that can be used to guide self-reflections and note both where bias may show up in your practices. While some of these reflection questions can be challenging to think about, they are an important step towards the initial deep self-reflection necessary for practice and system level change. Here's some examples of the questions. Do you have realistic expectations for preschool behavior? How often are you disciplining racially and ethnically marginalized children? What is your speaking tone of voice and body language like when you are disciplining? And are you using threats as a form of control? Are you using exclusion from the learning environment as a form of discipline? As you observe and evaluate your own practices, use these questions to help you understand yourself and your practices. If you miss it in the moment, take time to reflect with a colleague afterwards. Next slide. As we close out today, we want to leave you with the following considerations: that there's more to learn around how we can think about emotional responses to stress, examine how we can add, we can show, and how we should use trauma-informed discipline to foster inclusive classrooms, how we can reduce racial bias and how it shows up in our discipline practices, how to measure and be accountable to shifting interactions that are more focused on equity, representation, and of cultural backgrounds and heritage, and to reduce bias. And finally, to center racial equity and prioritize individualized development, support, and discipline for children within inclusive learning environments. Next slide.
Recently, Start Early and Access announced an exclusive partnership to develop professional learning to promote the Access framework to support educators and administrators to implement research-based approaches to equitable classrooms. The upcoming professional learning experiences by Access Start Early will support educators and administrators to implement recommended practices from the recent UPK Mixed Delivery Access and Quality Report in California. These learning experiences are designed to engage the learner's heart, emotional self, and mind, intellectual self in a journey. Start Early has developed the first phase of learning experiences, which is the 6-part Access Framework webinar series. The professional learning series for teachers and leaders will be coming in early 2025. Next slide. In case you missed it, you can now view a recording of our recent webinar, spotlighting and highlighting the brilliant Dr. Stephanie Currington in Beyond the Talk, Creating Racial Equity in the Classroom. This was the first session in the Access Framework Introductory Series, a 6-part professional learning series on building racially equitable early childhood learning environments. You can watch the free opening session of this series in English and Spanish. The research-based Access Framework helps educators identify a wide range of conditions and behaviors that may lead to lower outcomes for students from diverse backgrounds. By responding to children's particular needs, educators can create learning environments that value and empower children. In the free introductory session recording, participants will learn about why racial equity in education should matter, disparities in the school experience for children of color versus that of their white peers, the Access Framework and how it's designed to support the creation of racially equitable classrooms, how children of color experience racially equitable classrooms, and resources to learn more about creating racially equitable classrooms. You can scan the code that's here in the slide, or you can go to startearly.org/access, ACSES, or you can email us at professionaldevelopment@startearly.org to learn more. Next slide. We want to thank you for your time and your attention this evening, and for an opportunity to talk about access. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shanna, you're muted.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. I was just saying thank you so much, Dr. Carrington and Christy, for that fabulous presentation on fostering equity-grounded emotional relationships that reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in a P3 setting. We saw all of those emojis, those heart emojis for that presentation. We encourage participants to use the information shared in this webinar to inform their practice. By doing so, you can create a more equitable environment in your P3 settings, reduce the use of exclusionary discipline, and create more opportunities for teaching and learning. We're now going to be moving into our panel discussion. To start the next slide, we will introduce our moderator for today's discussion. Our moderator for today's discussion panel is Valentina Ware. Valentina is a child development consultant in the UPK Implementation and Support Office in the Early Education Division at CDE. She has 19 years of experience in early childhood education. She will introduce us to our panelists, who will be sharing their insights and expertise through the panel discussion around today's topic of fostering equity-grounded emotional relationships that reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in P through third grade settings. Thank you, Valentina, for moderating this panel today. Next slide.
Thank you, Shanna. Just want to do a mic test, make sure you guys can all hear me and I can see myself. So I'm going to assume you can hear me now. All right. Thank you, Shanna. Again, I am really excited to be here today moderating this discussion on fostering equity-grounded emotional relationships that reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in our P3 settings. Now, to begin introductions, I will start with Antoinette Pavela. Antoinette of OBGYN Aztec and Mayan ancestry resides in Auburn, California. She holds a bachelor's degree in early childhood education from Cal State, Sacramento, and a master's in counseling psychology and school psychology from National University in Sacramento, California. She is a retired teacher, social worker, counselor, and Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, qualified expert witness. She has dedicated 50 years to working with children and families. Antoinette authored a book for parents integrating early childhood development and balance with technology at home, and continues to provide consultation, training, and curriculum development on the ICWA and early childhood development through various California academies. Second, we have Dennis Evans. Dennis is a dedicated lead preschool teacher at Renew Hope Foundation in Beaumont, California. Originally from Bakersfield, California, he lived in Huntsville, Alabama from 1995 until 2010, where he worked as a chef for Bob Boomhauer's chain of restaurants. After earning an associate degree in psychology and early childhood development from West Hills Community College in May 2021, he is now attending Fresno Pacific University, completing coursework to obtain a bachelor's degree in early childhood education with a minor in exceptional students and disabilities. His famous catchphrase is, "In time, you will call me teacher." And he said that he says it in a Darth Vader voice, but I am not going to disappoint you with my Darth Vader voice because it probably will not live up to his. Maybe we can get it later. Next slide, please. Third, we have Andrew Crow. Andrew is the Deputy Director at Scholarship Prep, a network of charter schools focused on serving homeless and foster youth. He currently serves as the chair of the Native American Alumni Board of Notre Dame and as a board member of the Orange County Continuum of Care, a cross-agency elected board designed to end homelessness. Finally, we have Samantha Sayavong. Samantha is a site supervisor and early Head Start teacher at Seta Head Start in Sacramento, California. She has nearly a decade of experience as an early childhood educator. She has worked with both preschoolers and toddlers. Samantha graduated from Sacramento City College with an associate degree in child development and is now pursuing a bachelor's degree in child and adolescent development. She is dedicated to ensuring that every child receives high quality care, regardless of their socioeconomic status, culture, or developmental levels. Next slide, please. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and review all of our discussion questions before we take down our panel and begin our discussion. For our first question today, it will be, what does an equity-grounded emotional relationship look like in practice? Can you describe what a classroom that is using equity-grounded relationship building strategies looks like? And how is it different from other classrooms? For our second question, what are some of the most effective strategies you have implemented or observed for fostering strong, equitable, emotional relationships with students? For question 3, how can professional development be designed to help teachers, administrators, and support staff recognize and address their own biases and improve their relationships with students? And finally, for question 4, what actions can school districts, programs, family child care homes, and policymakers take to support programs transitioning from exclusionary discipline practices to more inclusive and equitable approaches? Okay, we will now take down our slides and begin our panel discussion. All right. Oh, I love this because I can see everyone's faces now. Now I can really feel like I am having a conversation, not just with myself. Okay, so for our first question, what does an equity-grounded emotional relationship look like in practice? And can you describe what a classroom that is using equity-grounded relationship building strategies looks like? And how is it different from other classrooms? So we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Dennis, if you can get us started.
Okay, no problem. In time, you will call me Father.
There you go. We got to hear it.
Or teacher. All right, well, we're going to start off with the real thing is you need to find out what the definition is when it comes to equity. Now, equity and equality, a lot of people get those mixed together, but they're totally different because equality, everybody's equal on the same page. But equity, everybody starts different. And that's the big key points for children when you're having them in a either preschool setting where I am, all the way up to third grade, which is our curriculum. You know, when you're going into Common Core, everybody's different. You got to find the kids where they are. And then next thing is going to be communication, open, honest communication with the child. Bring everybody in, bring in the teachers, bring in the parents, the grandparents. You know, it's a family figure thing. It's going to be a big emotional thing. And, you know, that's how the kids are able to ride that wave and become better. And we as teachers, guess what? We got to be out there playing with the kids, making sure they stay active, and remember that everything we do is going to be centered on the child.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for getting us started and really highlighting, getting down to the children's level, really highlighting that communication is key because you can't get anywhere without communication, right? And making sure that it is also open and honest. Now, I would like to go ahead and segue into talking a little bit more about what equity looks like in practice. And I know in some of our meetings we were discussing, you know, addressing those differences and biases. And Antoinette, you had some additional information that you'd like to build off of Dennis's response. If you could go ahead and piggyback off of what he just shared with us, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. So equity includes a culture of inclusion and acceptance of each other's differences through tolerance and justice through fairness, meaning all students are treated equally regardless of a teacher's biases or varying differences of all children in the classroom. So to treat children equally, teachers must be aware of their own identities and their own biases to reach that level of accepting all their students and their differences. It is also about the classroom environment and creating a space for a child to be a successful human as well as a successful student. The environment must provide a space of belonging through psychological safety, empathy, acceptance, connection, and value for one's tradition of culture that prevents isolation through feeling valued and respected. The benefits as such improves teacher-child and child-to-child relationships and supports children's behavioral and emotional regulation, which are drivers of academic readiness. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Antoinette. You brought in the aspect of culture and making sure that we are recognizing our own biases when it comes to, because you did talk about equality, right? But we're also our main focus is equity. So when speaking about equality, we want to make sure that, just to bring some clarification on that, is it's not that we're trying to treat every child exactly the same. It's, you're starting on that basis level of recognizing your own biases so that you're not treating children unfairly or allowing your own biases to interfere with creating that more equitable classroom or that equitable environment or school community. Now, I would like to move on to Samantha, because Samantha, you also talked about giving those opportunities for each child. If you could go ahead and share how you do that within your classroom environment, as you are also working with children as young as 18 months old, right?
Yes, thank you. So as like Antoinette had also mentioned as well, like, we want to create an environment that all children are treated equally. We're providing equal opportunities for each child. Not every child, every child that's coming in, they're all different at different levels. So one child might need a little bit more support than the other children might have. And also creating an environment for the children where they feel welcome. They feel like the teachers are there to support me, to make me feel like I'm comfortable with them. My parents are leaving me with them. So this is somebody my parents trust. Creating a classroom that, you're bringing things from the children's home. It may be a family photo, but of course, I would say honoring them if maybe they're not comfortable with having them. You can bring something else. They might have a blanket at home that they're carrying every day, just giving them that sense of belonging inside the classroom. And that also creates like less behavioral challenges in the classroom as well.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Bringing in those security blankets to make those children feel that they are really seen, valued, and definitely belong there, it's so critical, because this is their home away from home. And depending on how many hours your program is, they might be with you more hours a day than they are in their own home. So it's really important that you are creating those safe environments for every child, regardless of what their background is. Now, Andrew, could you add a little bit more about what's going to look different when a classroom is using these strategies to create that safe environment, and some things that your schools do?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. To tie it into our wonderful presenters, from the beginning of the session, they talked about discipline climate. What is the discipline climate that you currently have, and what is an equitable discipline climate? And equity in a discipline climate looks like a lot of positive communication, positive narration. You have rewards for the whole class, but also for individual students. And ideally, these are rewards that students, when they're able to, right, have the ability to give input on what rewards they want to see, what it looks like to be recognized. You would hear kids' names frequently, and you would hear them pronounced frequently. Valentina, as you said, they spend more time with us sometimes than with their families or caregivers. And you may be the first person to say their name since you saw them last, or you may be the first person to give them praise and acknowledgement since you saw them. So that's what you would hear. And the final thing is that you would hear positive, reassuring tone. And then for body language, what you wouldn't see is threatening body language. You would see positive, reassuring body language, and that is what you would see in an equitable climate. And hopefully that's what you're doing in your climates.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I really want to re-elevate something that you just said, which was that body language, because body language is communication as well. And then also really learning who your children and families are, so that you can recognize what body language may be interpreted as disrespect, such as like intense eye contact or not giving any eye contact. That is viewed differently in different cultures. So you will not learn that if you do not truly get to know your families. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us over to the next question. Those are some really great answers. I'm really hoping that the participants that are here are really taking some notes so that they can take it back to their classrooms or their programs tomorrow. So for our second question, we have: what are some of the most effective strategies you have implemented or observe for fostering strong, equitable emotional relationships with children. Now, I would like to go ahead and pass it over, actually, start us off with Samantha.
Thank you. So in the classroom, I the most like effective things I have tried are of course is building that relationship with the families when they first enroll, kind of getting to know how the children is at home, and or how what the parents might observe, and then touching bases on the child's temperament, how they behave in different scenarios, because that can also help us inside the classroom as well. The route we're at their level when we see the children are doing something, giving them positive affirmations, PDAs, using the teaching pyramids if you have been trained in it, and acknowledging that each child is different and give them the support that they need in the classroom, and just being there, so, providing them guidance, redirecting them if they need to, and providing providing the support that they may need.
Thank you so much, Samantha. You did bring up PDAs, and I'll go ahead and give the full name for participants that have not gone through the teaching pyramid training. So that would be positive descriptive acknowledgement, such as, oh my goodness, you put on your shoes, you're keeping your feet safe. So that is something that you're putting back the responsibility on to the child so that they can feel that they are doing something. And it's not necessarily praise, because if you really praise the child all the time, once you're gone, now they have no reason to continue to do those positive behaviors. They need to have that intrinsic motivation versus that extrinsic motivation. So with those PDAs, or positive descriptive acknowledgement, you're allowing them that opportunity. So thank you for bringing that up, Samantha. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Andrew, because I know that at your schools, you also do something similar to this, even with the older students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to really have the most effective PDAs, you have to know your kids. I feel like we're going to keep coming back to that, but you have to know your kids' skills, emotions, and needs, and what kind of PDAs that they need and respond to. And so for us at Scholarship Prep, the PDAs that we talk about with our staff to ensure that happens are making sure you're checking in on non-school issues. What is happening on the weekends? What are your interests? What do you like to do outside of school? Being on the same level as kids. Getting on the ground with them, getting in their level, but not too much in their space, and then being able to what we call making deposits into their emotional bank accounts. We know that at some point there is going to need to be discipline and consequences. So the more positive deposits that you can make, both with your children and with their families, it's going to be better for you when you have to draw those, balances out. And then a couple of things that we do is that we actually have our staff keep track of their positive connections. So how many positive accounts did you make with certain kids? And the final thing I want to say is we all think we're fantastic at this. I think I'm the best in the world. And then people come and see me and like, hey, no, you're not very good. You didn't see this kid. You didn't talk to this kid. You didn't even know that kid was rolling around on the ground. And so a couple of things that we ask is that when our staff are struggling to connect with a student or to make that relationship, we go see them, interact with another adult with whom they have a good relationship. And then we also have a peer or supervisor come in and observe us. Hey, I'm just not making a connection with this child. I can't get to know them. Can you come in and see the missed opportunities? Because we have to ask for help. I know that can be tough, but being vulnerable has been very helpful for us in building those relationships.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was funny when you said that you felt like, yes, you're the best at everything, but it shows that everybody has room for improvement, and you have to be open to that room for improvement and open to that constructive criticism so that you can become better. Because even the best person in the world at this is still going to struggle sometimes, and every child is different. And what worked 10 years ago definitely is probably not going to work today, because kids are different, right? Children are a lot different than they were 10 years ago. And it also sounds like you're really building a positive school community within your staff members, because they're actually willing to go and buddy up with people to be observed by their peers and to be observed by their administrators or supervisors, which makes a huge difference when you're really trying to create those positive school communities for all of your students and families. Now I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Antoinette. Antoinette, can you tell me a little bit more about what it looks like for when you're thinking about social emotional learning, when you're considering some of these strategies on how to build these environments for our children? Oh, Antoinette, you're
Oh,
muted.
yes.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Trying to find that button. So what comes to mind is a classroom and curriculum that supports ESL's call for culturally responsive teaching. This can include activities that reflect various cultures through food and art, as well as family engagement. This provides the classroom environment a climate of inclusion and value of individual cultures that supports the whole child. For example, years ago at my multicultural school, we had parents bring in recipes of food from their culture. This was part of our science curriculum. The children, all the children, as early as the 2-year-old class, participated in cooking following the recipes. And at the end of the day, at the end of the school day, the staff and the whole family came together and had dinner together at the school. This created a feeling of togetherness and acceptance of each other, as well as it built relationships and actually some long-lasting friendships. Teachers must be aware of the varying cultures of their classrooms and what may be appropriate or inappropriate based on certain cultural belief systems. From this, relationships are built, not only child to adult, but also adult to adult.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. And when you're talking about this activity that you did with children as young as 2 years old, you're really highlighting how all children are capable of learning. You just have to modify or scaffold depending on where that child is developmentally, not necessarily their age, but their development. And talk about creating that community, that positive community, and then building off of that family's village. You're having parents connect with each other, children who have parents who have children of the same age, so that they can create those long-time friendships, like you were saying, or long-time relationships. So thank you for sharing that story with us, Antoinette. Now, Dennis, I want to go ahead and have you wrap us up on this question. Is there anything that you would like to add for this question?
You know, what I would like to add is when it comes to preschool and TK, we try to do lesson plans. I know all teachers do lesson plans, but when you get a child into your class and you want to do equity based with emotional relationships, you know, your first 30 to 60 days, you want to do a baseline lesson plan, find out where the child is, where they're growing and stuff. And then after about 30 to 60 days, have that parent conference. You know, get the communication going with the parents. And then you can find out what the child likes, the dislikes, what they love to do, their cultural background. You get to get knee deep in things. And so the rest of the year, you can plan out an entire plethora of information and know-it-all. You know, one of the grandfathers might have been an old firefighter, you know, or a police officer. You get to bring those elements into your lesson plan for them, you know. When it comes to me, I love doing Black History Month. I love doing bringing my dashikis in from Nigeria. I bring them in. Hispanic culture, I bring it in. Any kind of culture, it's going to be with Hmong. I'm going to bring that in because it's so exciting to bring those different cultures, and they get to feel important, and the kids know that they're worth. Because at the biggest thing that a lot of people forget is children take on the personality of their teachers too. So when they see us excited and engaged and talking about their own culture, guess what? They start getting that sense of enjoyment of their own. And that will continue on as they grow.
Thank you so much, Dennis. What a way to bring in the community culture and your own culture and the children's culture within your classroom, because it is important that children can see their own culture represented in their environment. That's part of what makes them feel safe and makes them feel that they do belong there and that they are valued and that they want to come back the next day. And also too for the parents as well, because depending on the parents' experience in school, maybe you're giving them a little bit of healing. You're healing some of their inner child experiences as well, because those trauma goes on to the next generation. So if you can help that family address some of that trauma that they might have experienced as kids, you're indirectly helping the child as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take us on to question 3. Now for question 3, we have, how can professional development be designed to help teachers, administrators, and support staff recognize and address their own biases and improve their relationships with children and families? Now, it was really intentional to put support staff because every adult that comes in contact with the children makes an impact, even if it's just for a little bit of time, right? So I'm going to go ahead and ask Andrew if you could kick us off on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost that we have to be explicit that we are focusing on bias and identity. It has to be named so that people and can grapple with that, and that all your interest holders can be aware of what they are, getting ready to go into. Each, company and program and department and district has to figure out how to make it a safe space. Because when we're having these conversations, we will all have feelings. So it's incumbent upon us to figure out, can we do these conversations and trainings whole group? Do we have to create affinity groups? Do we need to do job alikes? Are there people that need maybe one-on-one conversations in advance to prompt them? As then once we get into the professional development, it is important that we are all vulnerable to name our own biases and to be okay with somebody, maybe not everybody, but somebody at least letting us know, maybe when we're not even seeing our own biases. And we have to figure out how it impacts our jobs. There are a number of ways through professional development that we can identify manners in which we can get on the same page. I saw some comments around, there are behaviors that students are doing, and do we punish or not punish? So things like eye contact and voice volume and how they're referring to you. Are you Mr. or Mrs. or teacher or your first name or last name? Those are cultural components that we have to be on the same page with. And then once we get into that work, it cannot be a one-time thing. It has to be an ongoing session where we name that there's going to be multiple times we're going to talk about this. And as we're talking about it, to go back to the vulnerability piece, we have to hopefully bring in examples of when we either did a really good job of being culturally competent and identifying what our biases are, or maybe we missed something. We missed the mark on how we responded to a student when we thought they were maybe having a misbehavior or maladaptive behavior when they weren't. That was just their culturally appropriate reaction. And the final thing is, this is tough work. This is a lot of work. There are many wonderful community partners and community agencies who are doing this work, who have done this work. So finding a community partner and starting with the CD, I think would be super important for you as you take on this work, so that it doesn't have to be shouldered by you and your team if you're not ready for that.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, definitely. This is continuous work. It is not a check the box. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And definitely you have to be open and vulnerable to really address those biases and to improve, right? And just think that I am glad that you said that it's not easy. It takes time. And so I'm going to go ahead and have us ask Antoinette, how can you add some additional information to this question? You're muted, Antoinette. There you go.
Thank you. So as it is important for teachers to identify and be aware of their own biases, so too it's important to understand that teachers do not just stand alone in their classrooms, but rather they're part of the bigger picture. So as Andrew had mentioned, some things, some types of personnel. So besides teachers, SEL and cultural competency training is essential for parents, teachers, administrators, all staff and school personnel, and community members to ensure there is an inclusion of responsibility and a space of empathy that is needed to create policy and practices that support and sustain SEL for children's education. It's also important to note that the needs for professional development may be different due to the school's district's varying socioeconomic demographics of their area or region. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Yes, definitely. These trainings may vary based on, the school district. It may vary based on the specific school. It might even vary based on the classroom, and the training that you did for your staff one year may not work the next year because the demographics are going to change. Maybe your staff is changing. So these are all things that you need to take into consideration when you're really trying to have intentional professional development around these areas, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dennis to see what would you like to add to this question. Oh,
Oh,
Dennis.
you don't want that. I'm a black male teaching preschool. I have
Hey.
no biases.
Oh, here we go. You got to drop us with those jokes today.
But all jokes aside, when it comes to me and my staff, and I talk a lot with supervisors as well, you have to go in with a blank slate. Listening to Christy and Stephanie talk about it as well, you cannot just go into a classroom and say, okay, what are the behaviors? Oh, it's usually the black and brown children. No, when you go in with a blank slate, you don't know what's going on. You go in and say, okay, what does this child need? What does this child need? And every day you have to believe that, hey, you're going to give everybody a blank slate. Because when the children start understanding, hey, I might have messed up yesterday, guess what? Today is a new day. Then they start getting those positive behaviors because they see how the teacher and the staff around them are being positive as well. And then that goes back to that, let's communicate. What happened today, because I'm a teacher all the time, I had to sit down with some of my friends. Hey, well, what's going on? Well, he hit me. Okay. Why did he hit you? Okay. Did he take your toy? Did he take your toy? He got in your face and was in your way. Hey, let's try again. Hey, we can do it tomorrow. Every day is a new day. It's like that one song. So, always do that. Always have those solutions because children are smart. They are observing everything we do as teachers, even as parents, and a lot of them, they see what's going on at home and see if they can do those ideas at school, which is the cultural thing. And then we have to say, oh, no. That's not how we do it in society. They're watching us, so we're showing them the correct way, and then they can bring their culture into it the correct and responsible way. And that's how you have that equity when everybody has the blank slate every single day, every single time.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Really definitely including that within your professional development when you're working with teachers and coaches and any adults that are going to be coming into the classroom, because you don't want to let the challenges from the day prior, create a cloud over what you're going to do and how you're going to interact with the child or the family the next day. My son's TK teacher, she has a quote that she uses, but I wish I would have written it down so I could have told you guys today. But basically it's saying what Dennis is saying, that every day is a new day. And really that's just an opportunity to have success, a new day, a new opportunity for success. So we're not going to let yesterday's challenges affect today's new opportunity. So thank you for bringing that up, Dennis. And I hope that we can use that positive reframing for the next day, for tomorrow, so that we can have a successful day tomorrow if today was a challenging day, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to Samantha. Samantha, is there anything that you would like to add for this third question on professional development?
Like Dennis had also mentioned, children, they're very observant, and if they see things at home, of course they may think it's the norm, and they'll reenact it or they'll say it at school. So I also think that just not the support staff or teachers or admins should get professional growth. I also think we should include parents as well too. At the end of the day, parents are the children's first teacher. And they may not know sometimes they're being biased or, teaching their children these biased ways. And it can just be something culturally that's embedded in them. It is a process, and it's not a one-time thing. Definitely, it's something that it's going to have to continue for at least over a few years.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Definitely adding in the parents and caregivers into these conversations and making whatever trainings that you are doing for your staff or teachers or any staff, right? That you're also making them parent facing, because Samantha is absolutely right that a parent is a child's first teacher, and it may not necessarily be the biological parent. It could be the caregiver. It could be the caregiver. That could be the grandparent. It could be a foster parent. It could be an adopted parent. And these are all people that need to be part of the conversation because they are adult influences in the children's lives. So I am so proud of myself. We are going to get to the final question today. I feel like I need my own little emojis right here. Okay, so for our final question of the day, what actions can school districts, programs, family childcare homes, and policymakers take to support programs transitioning from exclusionary discipline practices to more inclusive and equitable approaches. Now, Antoinette is going to start us off. And if you don't have a pencil and paper out, I suggest you get it out because she has got a great answer to share with everyone today. Take it away, Antoinette.
Thank you so much. So when we're talking about transformative SEL, social and emotional learning, it encompasses many state and local interest holders who need to come together to culturally sustain a SEL policy for learning. School policy must be reflective to support SEL in order to reduce suspensions. Its values drive the work in the school district and support SEL and equity. This should also be reflective in the vision. The value of inclusion allows the sharing of power through voice, choice, for evidence-based data collecting, and influences collaboration, all of which comes together to create a framework that supports SEL. It is also reflective in the district's budget to deliver sustainable funding to build capacity and launch SEL district-wide practices that includes hiring practices and policy changes that focus on equity. This is a continuous process as it is not a linear timeline, and it is necessary to be intentional with planning through authenticity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. Definitely a continuous process, all right? It's not going to happen overnight. So we have to make sure to give ourselves grace and make sure that you're continuing that work and make sure that you're not just going to give up when it gets hard because it's a, again, continuous process. Now, I would like to see if anyone else, one more person, whoever unmutes first, tag you're it, would have any final thoughts that they would like to add to this question before we bring our slide deck back up and I give any of my final thoughts. All right, there you go, well, Andrew. You're it.
I beat Dennis. I beat Dennis by.
You got me. You got me. You got me. I think my thing got blocked or something.
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with buy-in from as many people as possible. These are big changes that we're making to our structures and our cultures and our society. And so having that buy-in is going to be super important because it's going to affect all of our interest holders. We need to start with the why we are doing this, why we are making these changes, why we are not excluding, students for behaviors. I think it's very important to list out specifically what behaviors that maybe previously were punished for or previously suspended for or expelled for and what we're not going to do anymore. So having that list so it's very clear and transparent. We need to name what we're replacing the punishment with. So instead of X, which we used to do, we're now going to do Y, which that helps everybody to know what the consequences are going to be. We also need to name, as Stephen talked about in the very beginning, there are still going to be behaviors for which there needs to be consequences. Severe behavior, misbehavior will have severe consequences. And so ensuring that we all understand that it's not just nothing is going to be punished, that there are going to be consequences. They're going to be culturally responsive and appropriate consequences. There will still be safety, but we are going to ensure safety while helping our youth make better decisions. I think that's very important so that there is the buy-in, that there's an actual framework, and then finally that we are all forgiving and having grace because it's a long process. There will be hiccups. There will be things where it goes awry. We will have to revisit our policies and our procedures. And so allowing us all grace as we figure it out will be a wonderful way to ensure we have an equitable environment for our kids.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I'm really glad that you brought up grace again, and then also just those self-reflective practices, because man, they work. If you have, not only do you have to be vulnerable with other people when it comes to professional development and biases, you've got to be vulnerable with yourself. And sometimes vulnerable with yourself is even harder than being vulnerable. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. Vulnerable with strangers or coworkers or family or friends. So I really want to thank everybody for participating. Dennis, Andrew, Antoinette, and Samantha, you all did a really great job answering these questions that we had today. And I know I gave some thoughts within every single question, but some things that I just want to bring back up to light that I heard in all of your responses is that you all mentioned relationships, right? You all mentioned family engagement. And when it comes to an equity grounded classroom, it needs to be one where every single child feels seen, they feel heard, they feel valued. And I really want to add that they feel that they are capable of learning. The teacher that is working with that child really needs to believe that within themselves, even more so when the child is exhibiting behavior that may challenge you as the adult. Because as an adult, it's really hard to get out of your own way sometimes. So just making sure that you keep at center that relationship and that you really do feel that they are capable of learning. Now, I could probably talk about this all day, but I do want to stay on time and I want to respect everyone's time. So I'm going to go ahead and ask our screen sharer to go ahead and bring the slide deck back up so that I can give you that wonderful news about our PD certificate. All right. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, CDE is excited to offer professional development certificates to all attendees of this live session for the first time. And I see a couple emojis coming in, some positive ones. We've received numerous emails about this, requesting this. And like Shanna said in the beginning, we listened, we heard you, and it is here. Now, your professional development certificate will be sent from noreply.upk@gmail.com. I do want to reiterate that this is an unmonitored email address, so please do not reach out to us there. But you can reach out to us at the UPK mailbox, which is upk@cde.ca.gov. And it looks like that link has been dropped in the chat. Now, this is our first time doing the professional development. So in essence of this of this webinar today, give us a little bit of grace. We ask that you give us grace and wait for about 2 weeks. If you do not get your professional development certificate within 2 weeks, which is October 3rd, then please reach out to us. And Nicole, who is behind the scenes hiding, manages our UPK mailbox, and she will be very happy to send you that certificate. Now, please note, tell your friends for the next webinar that if you would like one, you must attend the live webinar. We're not able to manage who views the recording. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and say next slide and pass it over to Sarah to do her reflections and closing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Valentina. You're always such a wonderful facilitator that the whole team really enjoys watching you. So all I can say is, wow. And then, of course, I can say more. Such a deeply thoughtful and impactful discussion with truly useful content, all of which was shared today, and we can immediately take action on. So, Valentina, I want you to know that I took notes. Few things rose up for me around all behavior is communication, and it tells us what people are thinking and feeling. We have to really understand, consider the children's needs and their cultural experiences, to look at behavior with a lens of their emotions, their trauma, their strengths. To make it really stronger, we can ensure that every child is getting what they want and ensuring they have those emotional connections with us. And being really positive with reassuring body language, getting down on their level so we're on the ground with them. I appreciate all of these for so many reasons and really think that we can take this into our California State preschool programs, our transitional kindergarten, K, first, second, and third, and really make a big difference immediately. As someone who actually was a former biter, Dr. Walter Gilliam always loves the story of how I was a child who struggled with that and went back and forth between cultures and languages and countries when I was little, and having a husband who was a boxer who taught my youngest daughter worldwide wrestling, and we got talked to about her behavior. She did WW takedown. I truly understand that different culture and ways of engaging can be really different, and that we have to understand and support families and children and teachers in those spaces. So as we move forward, just a true thank you, appreciation, and gratitude to everyone who made this webinar happen today, and so that we were able to discuss fostering equity-grounded emotional relationships that reduce the use of exclusionary discipline in P-3 settings. I want to thank all of you who made time in your busy days to participate and hear this webinar. Once again, thank you to our presenters, Dr. Stephanie Currington, who I feel blessed to have gotten to engage with multiple times the past couple of years, Christy Norwood, and our partners at Start Early, Antoinette Fabiola, Dennis Evans, Andrew Crow, Samantha Saivong. Thank you for being here and for participating and sharing your wisdom. I would also like to thank our CDE team. We would never be able to do this if we didn't have such rock stars who help us with our success. Shanna, Beth, Steve, Teresa, our entire UPK implementation and support office team, Valentina, Anna, Nicole, Stacy, Stephen, Sarah, Jennifer, Kate, and Stephen, our technology services department. As you can hear from all those names, it truly takes a village with so many great minds working together to make this event happen. So thank you, entire team. Thank you, participants. Thank you, speakers. I would like to leave us all with a quote from Carolyn Belden. Equality is leaving the door open for anyone who has the means to approach it. Equity is ensuring there's a pathway to that door for those who need it. Have a great evening, everyone.